Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Rodriguez, and I am the current president of the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association. For July 2020, we have selected Judge Garcia-Wood as the Judge of the Month. I hope you enjoyed this interview.
Judge Garcia-Wood, would you tell us where you're from?
Well, I was born in Santiago de Cuba, Oriente Cuba, which is part of the eastern portion of Cuba.
That's wonderful. And what are some memories that you have from being from Cuba and moving to the United States?
Well, my family and I moved in 1969. I was 8 years old, and I vividly remember the difficulties that my family were going as a result of the communist regime and the struggles that my family had to go through. My father spent 3 years in a sugar labor camp cutting sugar cane in order for him to pay his ability to leave the country. I come from a sibling group of 5. I'm the 4th, and the age group were from 8 to 10. No, I'm sorry, from 6 to 10 when we came over to the United States. So when my father was sent away, I was 5, and my youngest brother was almost an infant. And I remember, my mother, the food being rationed, and my mother having to barter in the black market a cup of rice for a cup of beans in order to sustain the family. I vividly remember when we were getting ready to leave the country, they had committees set up in your communities, and we had a young couple that lived next to us, and my parents exchanged their furniture because our furniture were a little bit better than theirs. They had nothing. They had just gotten married. And we had exchanged the furniture through the window. And in the next morning, we had the chairperson of the committee knocking at our door saying that they knew that those were not our furniture. And if we wanted to leave the country, we better get our furniture back. Stuff like that. I remember that we had to leave all personal belongings. My mother, the only item that she asked to be able to leave the country with was her wedding ring. And they do an inventory when you left the country. And my mother left her wedding ring while getting ready. And she begged the officer to let her go back to get her wedding ring. And he was able to do that. I remember boarding a train, and from Santiago to Varadero. Varadero is supposed to be the most beautiful beach in the Caribbean. And I remember it was the first time I actually left our city. I remember going on the train and hearing about everything that my parents were hoping that we would be able to experience in the United States. And I remember the last food I had when I left Cuba. And things like that. And just arriving, I was processed through the Freedom Tower in Miami. And I remember getting there and meeting the people from the Red Cross, and, they would give you a little box, which my grandfather told us that when we got there, we're going to get a box, and we're going to have, they were going to give us stuff. Well, the box was basically a box of toiletries. It wasn't that, what you experienced, you thought that you were going to get, a big surprise. It was just a box of toiletry, toothbrush and toothpaste, stuff like that. So I have those vivid memories. I have memories also being called a worm when I was in school, because we were leaving the country, and the people that were leaving the country were called worms, o gusano in Spanish. And, the young Cubans that were part of the regime were called the pioneers, the young pioneers, and they would wear a scarf around their shirts to let everyone know that they were part of the regime. And I remember, students would say that, with Castro, they would get stuff and we would not get anything because we were worms, because we're leaving the country. So those are some of the memories I have.
Gosh, some good, some bad, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Did any part of that lead you to want to become a judge in this country?
Well, actually, when I came to this country, one of the first big obstacle I had was the language. In Cuba, when you finish a grade, and I think in a lot of Latin American countries, when you finish a grade, you're given a test. And based on your test, it would depend whether you would transition to the next grade. When I got here, I had just finished the 3rd grade in Cuba. And I never had to repeat any grade in my life. But when I got here, because I didn't speak English, I was held back a year. And that really affected me because I really pride myself in being a good student and what have you. But early on, one of the things that I love about this country was our form of government. And because of that, I wanted to ensure that what happened in Cuba would not happen in the United States. I loved, the history of the, the checks and balances and the separation of powers. And all of that early on motivated me to become an attorney. Now, I didn't have any role models as attorneys, but my parents had a friend who had a daughter who was in law school. She was in her 1st year of law school, and she kind of, talked me into pursuing a legal career. However, she actually she dropped out of law school after her 1st year, said it was too tough, and that was not really what she wanted to do. And I, got involved in different aspects of the government to ensure that that's what I wanted to do. I worked in different law firms, from being a runner to doing clerical work, just surrounding myself to ensuring that, this is the career that I wanted for myself, because I didn't have role models. I didn't have any uncles or friends, close friends that were lawyers. And so I did that while I went to college, and I wanted to make sure that this is what I wanted to do.
And how do you like it so far?
Well, I love my profession. I love the legal profession. It's given me so many opportunities that, a lot of people might not have had. It's something that I'm very proud of, the fact that, I'm a lawyer and I was able to learn skills to help people in my career.
Judge, so you've made a difference in a lot of different people's lives over the years. And I want to turn to the impact that you've made in the community, starting with your decision to be a founding member of our organization back in 1989. Can you tell us about what led you to become a founding member of the organization?
Well, I grew up in Miami. After my family and I moved from Cuba, we resided in Miami. I grew up in Miami. I went to school in Miami. Although I went to University of Florida for law school, after graduation, I went back home. And the reason that I came to Broward for a legal opportunity. I was looking to work for a firm where I would have court experience. I wanted to be in court every day, wanted to be a litigator. And so I had the opportunity to come to Broward for a job opportunity. And I was completely shocked when I came to Broward County. Having grown up in Miami, and it's such a diverse community, I would come to court during motion calendar, and I never saw people that looked like me. Certainly there were no judges on the bench at the time were Hispanic descent. And so in the fall of 1988, I had attended the National Hispanic Bar Association annual meeting. And I was discussing with the president of the organization that I felt very isolated as a Hispanic lawyer in Broward County. And he challenged me to do something about it. And he said, why don't you start an organization? And I was out of law school, maybe less than 5 years. So you're starting to say to yourself, well, how do you even start an organization? And so he introduced me to Carlos Reyes, who apparently had shared similar points of view about being a lawyer in Broward County. And so Carlos and I met, and we had that same common goal of wanting to bring Hispanic lawyers together because the Hispanic community was growing in Broward County, but no one knew where they were. And so, back in 1988, there were no computers, no cell phones. The Bar Journal was like the size of a directory. And I would sit on my lunch hour and would go through the names of the lawyers in Broward County to identify the Spanish surnames that I recognize. And when I had a list about 100, Carlos and I started writing letters, trying to find out if there were interests, other people that had the same interests as we did. And so we scheduled our first organizational meeting. I never forget it. It was in March of 1989. Anyway, so it was pouring rain in March of 1989. And I said to Carlos, you know, if just a handful of lawyers show up, we would be happy. And we were astonished that we had over 25 lawyers come on a evening after work on a rainy night in March. And everybody was like excited, you know, to start the organization. And so we started with, you know, drafting the articles and the bylaws. And by May of 1989, we were officially an organization.
Now, to wrap up our session, I want to ask you something about your culture. What is your favorite thing about your culture?
I love everything about my culture. I love being Cuban. I love the food. I love the dance. I love the rich literature, politically, social, economic aspect of being Cuban. I love the sports. I'm a big sports fan of baseball and boxing, which is part of the Cuban culture. So I love everything about the culture. As I said, starting with the food to the arts, there's so much richness in our culture that you know, it's important for me to preserve for my family, for my children, and to have that. And this organization actually does that. You know, it's representative of what I'm about, you know, of where I came from. You know, it reminds people where I came from, and you know, I want to preserve that history.
Thank you,
So
Judge.
I love everything about my culture. I love the dancing. I love all of it.